to come. And that's about all you can really tell people. And it's kind of vague, but that's the nature of this business. If you've been on deployment, you know that without the work crews coming in, we can't do the work. Assessors are usually easier to come by than work crews because they're usually 1 or 2 people. Work crews could be a team of 5 to 8 and have to be willing to really get into it. So you have to just kind of choose your words carefully, but give them hope that, yes, we're here to try to help them spiritually and physically. Does you have a question?
Yeah, I think you sort of addressed it because you said earlier we can't promise them that there'll even be a follow-up to our assessment. Right. So you're really saying that we hope that someone,
yes,
a team will come back.
Definitely don't promise to rebuild. Right. That's off the table completely. But we will probably have somebody come in and do the mud out, what we call mud out or tree work, but we can't even promise that or when it'll happen. You know, a lot of them think they're coming in the day after you leave. Well, we don't know that. It's based upon the works that the crews coming in, and that's what we have to make it clear. That, you know, we have crews that are coming in, and when we have a crew that we think we can handle this, they will call you and schedule it. Don't give them a timeline, and don't give them an assured promise, but be hopeful.
And I guess the thing we need to point out is that we're all volunteers, and
exactly
how quickly and if we can get to you will depend on whether we get the volunteers needed to do the work.
Exactly. That's a good way to say that we are volunteers. Now, with that said, a lot of them say, well, can I hire somebody to take care of it? Sure. You can do whatever they want. But if they do that, we need to know so we don't send a crew out there to do something that's been done. Most people that we see are in need. They don't have the money or they don't have insurance. You know, with flood, if you didn't have flood insurance, and even some really nice homes that got flooded didn't have flood insurance, it's completely on them and out of their pocket.
Like
so,
huh? Like in Lumberton. Nobody
well, Lumberton,
and then they got hit a year later.
And you know, and we're typically, not always, but typically dealing with people that are in the poverty level. They're barely making it as life goes on, and when they get something like this, it really sets them back. They may not even have a place to live. They may be living in a car or a truck or a family or whatever. FEMA did allow some people to live in some of the hotels, but that ran out pretty quick. And there's still people that aren't back in their homes, and we're still trying with that process now. So walk and look, and we're going to talk more about this specifically, but you know, you're going to walk around the house. You got to look and see what's going on. Have the survivor there with you or have another assessor with you, so you got 2 sets of eyes looking at stuff. Don't rush the process, but obviously, you know, you got other things you got to do. You can't stay there all day. But, you know, just be careful what you're looking at. We're going to get more specific about the things you want to look for. Take measurements. That's where that tape measure is going to be handy. One of the things on your form that we added this year was the height of the crawl space. In a lot of cases, you're pulling out insulation. You're not, but somebody's pulling out insulation and ductwork. And we had some teams that couldn't get under the house because it was so shallow, because nobody said, you know, it's only 8 inches.
I had to do that the last time.
Right. That was fun, wasn't it?
Because I was the only one small enough to get in.
Well, God bless you for doing that.
Yes.
Nobody likes to crawl in a crawl space. And, you know, we find first-time volunteers are the great ones to send because they'll do it once. You know, you give them the Tyvek, the mask, the glad, they're ready to go. And you know, and I would talk to a few on the way back. Did you have fun? Well, they tried to have fun because they fellowshiped with one another. And they knew why they were there and the reason they were there. Would they want to do it again? Maybe not. But they did it once, and that's all that matters. They were willing to do it once. But yeah, we step out of our comfort zone in this ministry, and some of it way out of our comfort zone. But remember, you know, God's leading us to do this for a reason.
I had a crew of all women, and it was awesome.
Yep. We had, I think there were 50, 25 and 2 Saturdays in a row. Young men and women that worked in the insurance office. They were farm credit insurance. And they were from all over the country. And they were, you know, middle-class office workers. They'd never done anything like this. They were ready to go. Some of them women wearing the makeup and the ears. I'm thinking, if you knew where you were going, you wouldn't have all that stuff on. We gave them the Tyvek suits, the mask. They went in there. They came back with the greatest spirit. And I was so proud that they had that experience. Of course, the experience was being able to help somebody, share the love of Jesus, and they knew they weren't going back the next day. So, but that's okay, you know, because we need all people from all levels and all willingness. So take measurements. So you need that tape measure. You don't always need a walking wheel, but you know, if you measure what one of your steps is, sometimes it's 2 to 3 feet. If you need to take a measurement, this tree's so many feet off the house, you don't have to be exact, just kind of get a rough estimate. Taking pictures we talked about, that can say a lot. If you got a tree laying on a house and you're not really sure what skill level is going to be required, what size chain, well, you're going to be measuring the tree girth so you'll know what size saw, but you know, if you're not sure, that picture will tell the site coordinator or the work crew, yeah, we can do it, or no, we can't do it. So that's why that's important. Forms, signatures. In many cases, your signatures have already been done for you. Some cases, if you're canvassing and you're getting that initial work order, you've got to have a signature. We cannot work on people's homes without the signature. And something we haven't mentioned yet, but I'll go mention it now, we don't work on rental properties but from the renter. If the homeowner is there, we can work for them. We don't do commercial properties, we don't do second vacation homes, we work for primary residence of owners, okay? So sometimes we have to ask that question, are you the owner? Sometimes it's verified. I know in Lumberton, they would check tax records and see whose name's on it, because some people will tell you they own it when they really don't. And it puts us in a liability issue.
So the owner of the property has to give you permission.
Yeah, and we have to have a signature. It's a disclosure. You'll see the copy of the work order, which is, I call it a work order. It's actually the request for service. It's a two-part form. You'll see that there's a place to sign that. And I hope you all will get a chance to read that just so you know what the homeowner is reading. And they get the pink copy, which is the second, and we keep the original. We have to have permission, because if not, there's a liability issue. And, you know, with everything going on in this world, we're just protecting ourselves. The worst thing we can do is get sued as volunteers for doing something. You know, we're trying to help people. We're trying to protect ourselves. Yes, sir.
I was doing mud outs in Swainsboro area and Cape Carteret. There's a lot of vacation homes down there. I know we did some vacation homes.
Well,
what's the detail on that?
I've been told we don't.
Okay.
Now, there may be some instances where they were doing it.
Yeah.
But as far as we're concerned, as assessors, we're doing primary residence. We're not doing second vacation homes. We're not doing rental properties unless the property owner's involved. We're not doing commercial property. We're not doing condominiums and apartments. We're doing single-family homes in most cases, unless you're told otherwise. And that would be on a site-to-site basis. Yes, sir.
Question, two questions. You said on rental property, we don't do that unless the owner is involved. What do you mean, the owner is involved?
Property owner, the one who owns that property.
All right. Example from Wilmington, 2 houses next to each other. Lady owned both houses. She rented the second house.
Right,
The second house, when she rented out,
right,
was severely damaged.
right.
Would that one have qualified?
Yeah, if she's the property owner and signs it, yeah.
The property owner signed
Right,
it, she
right.
would have done that.
You just can't go by the renter's signature,
Right.
because they're not the property owner.
Okay.
But yeah, that's good information. We're gonna have to keep moving along. We got a lot of material, and I don't want to keep you too long tonight. Of course, what we don't finish tonight, we'll finish tomorrow, but I'm gonna answer all your questions if I can. But let me get through this material a little bit more, and then save your questions, and we'll take some more in a minute. So complete the forms, get signatures if you need to. If they send you out with a form, and this is something that would probably generate from the site, and they say we need their signature. And if we don't get the signature, we can't send a work crew out. Or if you're generating the work in the field, obviously you need signatures. Not only do we have one on that request, but if they need shockwave, and if it's been flooded, they probably will. We have another form that needs to be signed as well. So, and you'll get those forms at the site. So at that point, you explain what happens next, and that's what we just talked about, that we have volunteer work crews that come in, and if we have a work crew that can handle this job, they will call you and arrange to come. That's probably the best way to handle that. That way you're really not committing, but you're giving them hope that something may happen, okay? But don't ever say, yeah, once we tear it out, we'll come back and fix it, because we won't. And they want to know that, because they see their house being destroyed, not destroyed, but they see it being ripped out. They want to know who's going to put it back. In many cases, they're responsible for that. They're going to have to pay a contract. Sometimes we can do it, but in most cases we don't. But again, that's what you have to be careful with. Then, once you're done, you share, witness, and pray. Again, that's our ministry. We want to do the other stuff, but we want to make sure before we leave that we touched them, we shared the word of Jesus, and we prayed with them. And that's the good way to leave them, because they're saying that, you know, we do care about them, and we care enough about them to pray with them and share the love of Jesus. All right, so we want to keep ourselves safe. You know, we're dealing with survivors that obviously have been through a lot, and we want to be aware of their safety as well. So these are some of the things that we have to watch out for. Down power lines. You'll see some pictures later on of some unsafe structures. If you don't feel comfortable going into a house, don't do it, because that feeling you're getting is probably for a good reason. And you have to evaluate that. No one can tell you if that's a good place to go or not. And I always tell people, before you leave the site, and I'm going to refer to it as the DROC, it's the Disaster Recovery Operations Center. It's a short word for DROC. You're going to go there before you go anywhere else. You're going to get forms, you're going to get the phone number of the DROC and the address, because that's a number and an address you're going to relay to whoever needs that information. You may use your cell phone to make an appointment, because there's not going to be enough phones for you to use, but don't give out your cell phone number, because they'll be calling you 6 months after you leave saying, when are you coming back? Because I've been getting that. And you just make sure you give them the right contact number. So be careful out there. Look at the power lines around you. If you see a power line laying on the ground, assume it's hot and don't get close to it. Unsafe structures, inadequate ventilation. Now you may go into or see a house, you may not even get inside, and it's covered with mold. I mean, it's bad. And it's all closed up. It hadn't been ventilated. Well, you don't want to be in there long if you go in at all. Put a mask on. The N95s, that's on your checklist. You can buy those at Home Depot. They would also probably be at the site. But as assessors, we have to kind of be prepared, because it's nice to have all these things set up at a site, but you may be there the first day they open, and they may not have anything there. It's good to bring your own safety equipment, your own mask, maybe a Tyvek suit, safety glasses, boots. I mean, have the stuff that you need. You almost, if you're going to do this, and sometimes you have like a day's notice. Doesn't mean you have to be prepared to go in a day, but it's always good to have your stuff kind of ready to go, so that if you get called, you don't have to spend 2 days getting all your stuff together. You got kind of stuff ready to go, you grab a bag and you go. That sounds easy, and sometimes it's not that easy, but you know, the kind of things that we're talking about on that safety list, a lot of the stuff you have already. You may just not have it in a bag ready to go, but the mask and gloves and things like that are something you may want to purchase, just so you'll have it ready. And you can use that stuff around your house too. It's not something that you'll only use there. So inadequate ventilation. If you walk in the house, it's got a lot of mold, and say the homeowner's living there. Well, he shouldn't be in that house breathing that stuff. You need to advise them that he needs to open those windows up, that it's not safe for him to be in there. We have to kind of be an advisor, but you can't make anybody do anything. But you can tell them the hazards of being in a house full of mold. But you want to ventilate it for him and for you. And when you go in there, you spend as little time as possible evaluating it, and then when you talk outside. I've had people, want to talk to me inside, and I said, let's go outside and talk. It's just not safe in here. So that's what it means by inadequate ventilation. Fallen trees, don't walk under or get near a tree under pressure or one that's fallen. Septic tanks and wells. Those are some things that we want to identify on a site. Because if we have equipment going out there to move trees, we don't want them running all over that stuff. That's what that marking tape that I told you about earlier. You can mark a wellhead or something if it's not real visible. Nails, glass, other sharp objects. You can assume that everything and anything could be there. If this place was flooded, stuff is floated from everywhere. That's why boots are real important. And if they're staying in water, I even recommend a pair of rubber boots, because a pair of leather boots will get soaked really quick. I've been in places that you had, several inches of standing water. And the only way you get through them is with rubber boots. And even then, you got to be careful where you walk, because sometimes your foot's in there, not a shoe. Again, those are just some of the things that you may want to have. Avoid dehydration. We talked about that. Making sure you got water. Sunburn insects and animals. Treat those accordingly. Animals could be domestic or wild. You roll up on a site and this dog's barking his head off, and it belongs to that survivor, ask them to contain it. You don't know what that animal's going to do. Remember, that animal's been through that trauma too, and you don't know
you're a stranger that just shows up and you don't know what kind of mood this animal's in, don't take chances. If you're not secure around the dog, have the owner secure the dog or stay in your car until he does. And then roadblocks. Roadblocks are there for a reason. There could be a washed out road, could be a flooded road. Don't go around a roadblock. Find another way to get to where you're going. That's why it's important to have the GPS or maps so that you can find an alternative route. Sometimes those roadblocks will be manned by a sheriff or policeman, but sometimes they're just roadblocks. Or you may be there before anybody else has been there, and you see a damaged place. You want to make note of that and pass that information on. You see a cop or something, you say, hey, I was down this road and it's washed out. They may not be aware of it yet, so just be careful. It's if you've not been in an area like that, it's like a war zone almost. You don't know what to expect. You just have to keep your eyes and ears open. So going to see some pictures now. What does anybody see in that picture? I see a lot of water damage. That looks like a coastal picture. I can't be sure, but obviously there's been a lot of standing water. There may have been some wind damage. It's hard to tell, but you don't ever know what you're going to see. Now, this was a very common sight and is when we have a large disaster. That debris possesses a lot of hazards. You don't know what kind of chemicals are in it. You don't know what kind of materials out there. They've thrown it out on the road. They're not supposed to put stuff in the road. A lot of it could have been on the curb and fallen into the road. But if you're walking around this stuff, and you may go into a neighborhood that's already looking like this, a lot of times the survivors have already started the process. They know that they got to get this stuff out of their house. So you may see something like this before anybody's ever gotten there. And you may be one house that, somebody's living there and isn't able to move stuff out. So be careful walking around areas like that. And don't forget to look up. You could have a hanger just hanging up in a tree ready to fall out. Keep your eyes and ears open and look all around you. Just one thing about hangers, so I don't forget to say it. There's a lot of things we just can't promise or do. You got a hanger up in a 50-foot tree. We don't have any way to get to that. We don't have bucket trucks. I think we've got 2 tree climbers in the whole state. So you're going to just have to tell people, we can't help you with that. You're going to have to call a professional to take care of that. Don't say, well, I'll go back and see if I can find somebody that can do it. No, we're not going to be able to do it. And we're going to talk about roof pitch as well, because that's another case where you just have to flat out tell them we can't do it. So back to the forms. You got a copy in there. Fill them out completely if they haven't been given to you. The very first thing on that form, underneath the heading, says site number, phone number. That's how important that is. These are new forms, and because it was being missed so many times, they decided to put it there. So as I said before, make sure when you leave the site you know what that contact phone number is and what the address is. In case they need to come and sign something, they have to know where to come. So you need to know that. You found it, so you have the address. You may not have the phone number till you get there, but share that information. And then the assessment form is now a separate form, and you've got a couple of copies of the new assessment form, and that's a new form. And then some of us refer to the request as a work order. The assessment is an assessment form. All right, that's our checklist. Signatures are required on the main form, and details. You have ways you can add notes. If you look at your assessment form, on the far right column is a place where you can put notation. Okay. We're going to go over that some more as well. Sometimes it's necessary to do a little sketch of the house. And it doesn't have to be fancy. You can draw it on the back of your assessment sheet. You can draw the outline of the property, locating wells, septic tanks, if there's gas lines. If there's a particular tree or something, you can kind of mark it and, like I said, walk off the distance from there. If there's multiple trees and they're only dealing with certain trees, maybe wrap them with that marking tape. We have to try to assume that the work crews that are coming out aren't going to identify everything you're identifying. So your job is to identify these issues, mark them if necessary, document them so that when you go back to the site, you can relay that information to the site coordinator, which will relay it to the work crews. You'll very rarely deal with the work crews. You'll work with the site coordinator who coordinates the crews to the assessments. If there's a lot of brush and stuff has to be brought to the street, sometimes it has to be put in a certain area. Sometimes you'll get direction from the survivor. And in some cases, not all their furniture is going to end up at the street. A lot of hardwood furniture can be cleaned up. Upholstered furniture won't. They'll say, well, won't it dry out? I'll say, yeah, it'll dry out, but it'll be full of mold. So, and it's hard to tell somebody that half their furniture is going to end up on the street torn away. So you have to be kind of delicate with that. Lower kitchen cabinets, you know, if it's compressed wood, it's going to be destroyed. Appliances that get wet, they're going to be destroyed. So that comes into telling them what to expect, because you need to let them know what to expect. If they flat out say, well, I don't want you to do any of that, then you can't do it. You just have to say, well, thank you, and God bless you, and move on.
See a question? Okay. You can use symbols. There's some symbols in your handbook there that, if you want, or you can draw a circle and write tree beside it. You know, however you want to do it to identify what's going on there. In some cases, we need equipment. If we've got large girth trees, you're not going to be able to manhandle them. They have to cut them in such small pieces, so we may need a skid steer or a piece of equipment to move it off the site to the roadside or in a truck or whatever. If you feel like it's needed, you need to put that on the form. There's a place on that form down below where it says equipment needed. You know, you can say, well, you need to remove several trees or whatever. Again, every instance is different. You just have to evaluate what's there. In most cases, and I wouldn't say in all cases, but in most cases, if you're new at this, you're going to go out with an experienced assessor probably the first time, maybe the first day. After the first day, you're a trained professional. But we try to
Get you teamed up with someone who's been there before, because, you know, you're out of your element and you haven't done it before, so we want to make sure you're good at what you do, and having somebody experienced is always helpful for your first couple times out. This says we clear 30 feet from the home. I think in the handbook it says 40 feet. That's not a given number. You have to evaluate what's there and what makes sense. You may not even have 30 feet for a backyard line, but that's just some guidelines. Mark flood lines. In most cases, you're going to see a line on a house, and you'll see a picture or two. You'll see a water line on the outside, and if you go inside, you're probably going to see that too. If you feel like you need to mark it, certainly you can. We talked about dogs. In the mud out, when a crew comes in, we don't want animals loose and in the way. So we have to tell the homeowner or the survivor that when our crews come, you're going to have to put your dog up, put them in the yard, take them somewhere, because it'll just be in the way. And the doors are going to be open, and people are going to be going in and out, and if the dog needs confinement, that's not the place for them. And if we spray shockwave, nobody can be there, and we'll talk more about that later. So too much info is better, you know, than not enough. And then pictures, of course, help as well. All right, so there's an obvious watermark. I don't think anybody would miss that. Now, with that said, you know, you see this is not working too good, but you see this is a crawl space. The white underneath the siding is your foundation. One of the first things on your form is the crawl space height. So what I typically tell you is to go find the crawl space entry. If you walk around that house, you're going to find a hole bigger than that, hopefully, that someone can get into. That's a good place to look under and to measure. Measure the height. If you see where that hole is on the side, the top of that foundation may be 4 to 6 inches above that. Use that as a kind of a guideline to the ground and give us that number. Find the crawl space hole, try to look inside. Sometimes it's excavated below grade, which would give you even more crawl space. Now, in a lot of cases, that's not the same height there as it would be in the front. That's okay. If they can get under there at all, then they can typically get the smallest guy to go to the shallow end once. But, you know, we had a lot of college volunteers, and they were ready. You know, a lot of them it was a game for a lot of them to see how much they could do, and they were competing against one another. That's the best volunteers you can get right there. Well, how fast do you think you can get all that insulation out of there? Let's time you. Well, you know what? Snakes aren't. I was in the heat and air business for 30-some years, and people say, "Well, how many snakes did you run into?" None. I saw a lot of snake skins. Snakes aren't going to hang around waiting for you. They're going to hide. They're going to get out of your way. They don't want to see you any more than you want to see them. Well, I realize there are cases where you may see animals, but if you make enough noise, they're going to try to avoid you. But you got to watch what you're doing. Now, as an assessor, you shouldn't be around in there anyway, but as a worker, you could be under there. Right. Now I've seen a lot of skins, so you know they were there. I don't get, I don't get scared with that. We had one team, a couple of my men cornered one with young up next to the chimney, and they were messing with it. Well, of course she's going to be aggressive. I said, get away from the snake. What would you do if it was your family and somebody was attacking you? But again, if you're making enough noise under there, they're going to avoid you. So don't worry too much about it, but keep your eyes open. So everybody sees that. That's clear. All right, there's your worksheet, and we could talk a little bit about that. You've got the basic information on top, name, address. Now you're going to be filling this one out, and you're going to be given a copy of the request. You won't ever get the original because that original stays at the site, but you'll get a copy of it, so you'll have the name and address, and you have to put it on here. Every job that comes out of the D-Rock will have a number assigned to it, a job number. That'll also go on there. And just go down the list. We're going to talk more about this form later on, but look at that a little bit tonight when you're looking at your handbook, because we're going to review this a little bit more in detail tomorrow. And the thing is, I want to impress upon you is to not rush this form. It's pretty well laid out. You just go down the list. Now, the left column is you check that if that needs to be done, that item. If it doesn't need to be done, you don't check it. But say, I don't have it in front of me. Let me grab mine. If it's a tree that has to be removed, you want to put down tree removal, and you want to indicate how big the tree is. We're gonna assign priorities and things to it, but what do I do with my sheet? Again, we're going to go over this a little bit more in detail tomorrow, but could be kind of looking over it. So the crawl space height, you got a place to write that in. How high was the flood water in the house? Are you going to remove personal contents? You check it. And to the right, you've got a place for notes. So if, did I scroll this too far forward? There we go. So say you got some stuff that's got to be removed, but the homeowner really wants this particular piece not to go on the street. If she wants it left on the porch. Those are the notes you put in here, because they may or may not be there when the work crew comes. That's why you've got to get as much information as possible so that everybody's happy at the end of the day. Cutting out walls, depending on the height of the flood, we may cut 2, 4, 8 foot. We'll go over a lot more of this stuff tomorrow, but it's pretty self-explanatory. You're just going to go down the list. If any of these things have to be done, you check them, and then you do the notations out to the right. When you get down to the trees, it asks you how many trees, what size, and the size is the diameter, the distance across that tree. That tells us several things. A, is it going to need equipment if you don't already tell us? And what size chainsaw they need. You don't want to go out there with an 18-inch bar if you got a 3-foot trunk on. So a lot of those things are information for the work crew. And even though we may not understand why we're asking all this, there's a particular reason. One thing I'm going to mention now, because I have a notation here and it's not on yours, you may want to write this on there. If there's trees in the yard with poison oak or ivy on them, we're not going to touch them. And that was brought to my attention by a tree crew. And they say, if we go in there and do it, we're going to be wrapped up with poison. There is ways to kill it, but we're not going to do it. If the homeowner wants to kill that poison and then call us when it's dead, we'll go back and help them with it. But if you see a tree with poison oak or ivy, and if you're not sure what that is, Google it up, get a picture of it so you got some idea what it looks like. Because if you do see one, we're going to tell the homeowner, the survivor, that